Good day, Gym Rats. Robert Moyer here from Bridges Fitness and Nutrition Consulting, also known as the GainsSloth, one of the trainer team here in the Gym Rats Discord server. This is the second of our Gym Rats Academy videos. These are intended to be community-driven webinars, panel chats and AMAs on fitness, nutrition and training topics selected by yourself, the Gym Rats Discord server. As these are new, we are kind of just rolling out videos driven by the trainer team to give you value and an idea of what these can be. But if you have subjects and questions that you want to ask and have answered in long form videos, head on over to the Gym Rats Academy channel and post them in the relevant forum threads, and we'll just collate and answer in upcoming videos. So this is our second video, and the main feedback we had from the first was mostly relating to audio levels, so fingers crossed that this one is acceptable, but I simply won't know until I reach the end and listen back. But do give us your feedback at all points about anything. These are made by us, but they are all for you, so tell us what you like, what you want to see improved, what you want to see more of. We just enjoy making these, but we want you to get the most out of them. So today's topic I've chosen is a bit of a deep dive on the subjects of overreaching, overtraining and burnout. Essentially, what are they, what separates them from each other, how they benefit, how they hinder, and also the warning signs to look out for. And the reason why I've chosen this is when chatting with you guys about training volume and fatigue, I see a lot of new lifters that seem to fear these things. And understandably so, they can negatively impact your training and gains, but I also think we are overly concerned about something that will largely not affect the majority of Gen Pop lifters. Yes, be aware of them, but also don't let the fear of something or the misunderstanding of something like this stop you from putting in the effort and making great progress. But hopefully by the end of this, you'll have a clear understanding of what they are, how to use them to your benefit, and also how to understand these signs and symptoms and strategies for recovery. But for those who didn't catch the first one, my name is Robert Moyer from Bridges Fitness and Nutrition Consulting. I'm not a bodybuilder or a powerlifter, obviously, as you can see, but I do work with Gen Pop clients from all over the globe in all walks of life. From traveling C-level business consultants to healthcare workers, stay-at-home mums, parents, all sorts. These on the screen are my credentials, but for now, let's just jump into the topics at hand, shall we? So first, let's talk about overreaching. So overreaching is a short-term increase in training volume or intensity that temporarily exceeds an athlete's capacity. In short, it's essentially pushing your body beyond its normal limits for a short period of time. Now, specifically, there are two types of overreaching: functional and non-functional. Now, functional overreaching is planned. It can lead to positive adaptations after adequate recovery. For example, during training, what we're doing is intentionally overreaching, essentially pushing ourselves beyond our limits to stimulate greater gains later on down the line. On the other hand, there's non-functional overreaching, which is unplanned and can actually result in a temporary decline in performance, especially when it's paired with insufficient recovery. Now, this tends to happen when the increase in training loads is too abrupt or too intense. And if you look at the kind of shoddily drawn graph on the screen, if you're watching this, you can see our baseline fitness along the middle. It's kind of that arrow pointing to the right. We've also got the green line pointing upwards. That's our baseline fitness improving due to the training stimulus. So you can see a green wavy line that's kind of pushing that up, and that's because that wave represents our training and fatigue levels and stress due to overreaching, because we're constantly reaching further and further, but also you can see it declines due to our training load dropping due to our recovery. Constantly overreaching to push our baseline levels up and up, essentially. That's what we're doing. We're aiming for something called supercompensation that pushes us up and up and up. The inverse of that is in red. We're pushing ourselves, but due to inadequate recovery, baseline fitness drops. And this is the negative impact of overreaching without sufficient recovery, also known as overtraining, which we'll talk about shortly. But let's just focus on what's above that baseline fitness. Let's focus on the good, right? So overreaching is a lot of the time positive, especially when we give the body the opportunity to recover and experience what's known as supercompensation, building back bigger and better. So common negative signs to look out for overreaching is just mild fatigue, decreased performance, mood swings, and maybe even a short-term loss in motivation. If you sense these and manage them correctly, overreaching can be beneficial. But if not, this leads to more serious issues, namely overtraining. So overtraining is essentially chronic overreaching with inadequate recovery. It's excessive load without adequate rest. It's unlike overreaching, which is very much a manageable short-term condition that leads to positive outcomes. Overtraining results in a persistent decline in performance. And that's that red line, which is the inverse that we saw at the bottom of this graph. So the wavy red line is you still performing despite a lack of rest and recovery, pushing yourself constantly over and over and over despite not being ready. That leads you to poor progression or even net negative progress. So you just regress and regress and regress. So signs and symptoms of overtraining are generally, as you might expect, more severe than overreaching and can include persistent fatigue, decreased performance even when rested, maybe some insomnia, low immune system, chronic injuries, and even emotional changes like depression and anxiety. Overtraining is legitimately serious and can significantly impact an athlete's career if you're an elite athlete. Recovery from overtraining requires oftentimes professional help, long periods of rest, sometimes even medical interventions and psychological support, especially at that elite level where they have sports psychologists as part of their team. For the average lifter, you may just need to look to your GP for help. So let's look at a pretty serious condition that's also kind of linked, especially when you look at that depression and anxiety piece. I've just noticed that this should say burnout at the top here, not overtraining, but we'll just put my face over there and pretend it says burnout. But I almost didn't include this one, but I think in this day and age where we are always on and people genuinely make the gym a part of their personality, and I mean that without shade, in a loving way, I thought it was quite prudent. So burnout is a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion. In day-to-day life, it can be caused by prolonged stress. When coupled with overtraining or constant overtraining in the gym, you're even more susceptible to it. But it's not necessarily sport-specific or gym-specific. But it can lead to a withdrawal from sport or activity entirely. I think it's also important to note that burnout isn't depression. It's a separate condition, but it can be a symptom of or include depression and anxiety. Anecdotally speaking, I experienced burnout last year and had to seek genuine psychological support to unpick why that was and rebuild my work and gym life off the back of that recovery. If you're not sure if you have burnout or you're experiencing burnout, look out for these specific signs, and that is extreme fatigue, a severe lack of motivation, and a decreased interest in activity, maybe a decreased interest in hobbies or friendships, maybe mental distress, social withdrawal, difficulty concentrating on even the most mundane or simple of activities or things that you used to enjoy, or just day-to-day life, and just a general quality of life reduction. Recovery can be a genuinely long process. As I mentioned, I needed therapy for like 24 weeks and a complete overhaul of how I was approaching life. I had to be very careful about how I reintroduced work, coaching, my own training, just to ensure that I didn't fall back into burnout. It can be incredibly debilitating. If you even remotely suspect you're burning out, take action right away. Just stop, think, give yourself some grace, just reflect on what might be leading you down this path or has led you to this thought process. We're all at risk of experiencing all of these things. Can these affect me? 100%. Even though only 1% of the server can probably call themselves an elite athlete, we're all at risk. But remember, they kind of grow in severity, with overreaching being actually quite useful. We need to chase it. And also that gap between overreaching and overtraining is actually quite large. Most, if not all of you who have feared overtraining probably just haven't worked that hard in the past. No shade, again, but considering the majority of us who think we're training 1 rep from failure or at failure are actually training 6 reps from failure, we've a long way to go before we're overtraining. But also note that you don't have to be overtraining to experience burnout. So be aware of that headspace as you are training. So most importantly, how can we prevent all 3 of these things? It takes a bit of a holistic approach. And I know a lot of people hate that word, but it genuinely does. My consulting firm, when we work with athletes in Gem Pop, is we look at a ton of different biofeedback markers. And here's just some of them that we look at from a day-to-day perspective, just to make sure that what we're suggesting our athletes do isn't kind of leading them down that path unintentionally. So firstly, we need to really have a good look at our program. Is it a proper program? That's essential. 101 fitness and training etiquette, right? Is your program proper? It should be individualized, should be periodized. It should have a variety of intensity and volume approaches, with, most importantly though, adequate rest and recovery programmed in. We don't fear fatigue, and this is what I want you to take away from this. Is we're not trying to say stay away from potential fatigue. Fatigue's important. Fatigue is what leads to that supercompensation. But we should be mindful of it and its impact on us in and outside of the gym. Secondly, but kind of also joint first, is nutrition and hydration. We should be ensuring we have a balanced diet, adequate protein, but also adequate nutrients and proper hydration. Let's make sure that we're fueling our body with everything it needs, not just looking at protein, carbs and fats, but everything outside of that. What's our gut health looking like? Are we eating enough plants? Are we eating enough leafy greens? Are we eating enough vitamins and nutrients and minerals and all that good stuff that kind of gets lumped in that we tend to forget? All of that is important. The third is a pretty big one, but psychological support. This is pretty vital. Make sure you have decent stress management techniques, good sleep hygiene, a support network at home that you can open up to when things feel pretty janky. Touch grass often. Get offline, get that fresh air, get that vitamin D. And finally, listen to your body. You know your capacity for recovery. If something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. So, to summarize all of this, overreaching is not inherently bad, but it is super useful and genuinely what we should be aiming for. But there is a massive gap as well between that and overtraining. But overtraining is a more serious condition and does require proper intervention. Burnout can occur independent of both of those. Especially it can be independent of overtraining, but it also can be a result of it as well. So just check in with yourself, with the server, with friends, with family. Make sure your preventative strategies are in place. And finally, if you suspect that you're over the line into overtraining or burnout, speak with a professional, not Discord. But that's it for today. There's no AMA at the end of this one, but if you have a subject that you want to include in the next video, as I said at the start, do head over to the Gym Rats Academy channel, and if you have just a bunch of questions that aren't necessarily topics that you want to include at the end of one of these videos, we will open up an AMA thread soon if it's not been opened already. But until then, see you in the server. Okay, bye.